Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It's time to continue my expose on the history of Magic the Gathering. This week, I'm introducing you to Invasion. Now, Invasion was released on October 2nd of 2000. It had 350 cards, and it was the first set in the Invasion block. Now, it introduced split cards as a mechanic, domain, divvy, and of course, it had the keyword of kicker that it introduced. Now, its symbol actually represented the coalition. Groups of all 5 colors of the civilizations of Dominaria coming together to oppose the Phyrexian. Now, of course, the important parts that they introduced were split cards to begin with. This was an interesting concept that it was 2 cards in one, that you could pay either cost, and whichever cost you paid, that spell effect occurred. So this was a very interesting variation on card types that was introduced. This set also saw the return of gold cards, of multicolored cards, which hadn't been seen since Stronghold. It had a major theme of multicolor and revolved around getting multicolor in the decks that it had, and the mechanics it had. And because of this return of gold cards, of multicolored cards, and the incredible power balance of it, Invasion is actually one of the most popular sets of Magic that has ever been printed. Now, it also saw printed versions of more members of the Wildlife Crew, including Captain Sisay herself. And it introduced a new creature type, which has shown up in multiple places, the Kavu. Now, it was accompanied by a novel of the same name, of course. Now, it also introduced, with this new multicolor function, that a land that would produce 2 different colors, it had a gradient between the 2 of them, between the 2 different colors, shown on its text boxes and coloring. So you could see a change in the 2 colors on this card, which became a standard for non-basic lands which produced multiple colors in the future. Now, the storyline saw that the Phyrexians were beginning their invasion of Dominaria, crushing civilizations under their foot, and the people of the world turned to Urza, who began to unite into a big army, a coalition, to fight back against the Phyrexians. Now, it had, of course, a 15-card booster pack, 4 pre-constructed decks, a tournament deck, and, of course, a fat pack. The pre-release was Kavu Framus, or Raging Kavu in Latin, so it was all in Latin, a special promo in a foreign language that wasn't used anymore. Now, it also introduced 3 special tokens that you could get for the sets, including a Sapperling token. Now, the other mechanics, other than the split lands, were of course Domain. Domain at this time did not have a name. It was given much later on in a later set that this ability was. But effectively, if you had a certain number of basic lands in play, different types of basic lands, it would grant a bonus dependent on them. So the more different types of basic lands you have, from 1 to 5, the more of a bonus this card would give. If you had all 5, you'd have a 5 bonus on whatever this card is doing. It also introduced a lot of divvy mechanics. Effectively, the person that cast the spell or used the ability would split groups of cards into 2 piles, and an opponent would choose which pile would effectively be used by the card. Whichever effect it would be, whether it's putting something into play or putting cards into a hand, that opponent is choosing between these 2 piles. And the keyword that was introduced was kicker. When a spell was cast with a kicker cost, you could pay that kicker cost as an extra amount of mana you're paying at the time of casting. And when the spell took effect, it had an extra effect dependent on if you paid that kicker effect or not. So it would have a normal effect, and if you kicked it, it would have an extra effect. Now, the Invasion had 22 cycles. First off, it had allied gold enchantments that had a special ability, but you could also sacrifice one of these for an additional effect. It also had allied colored split cards. It had a cycle of those. It had a cycle of auras, that each aura had an ability, but you could pay mana to return it to your hand. A cycle of Djinns, powerful creatures that would lose some abilities if their color was the most common amongst all permanents on the battlefield. It had a cycle of emissaries. Each one represented a important location on Dominaria, had a converted mana cost of 3, and a kicker cost of an allied color, giving an effect traditional to that allied color. It had a cycle of leeches. These were rare creatures that cost a little less than normal to pay, but unfortunately they had the disadvantage that when you would cast a spell of the color of the leech, it traditionally would cost you more mana. They had allied colored creatures that were 2/2s that had protection of another color, usually the next one in the color wheel. They had allied cover of activated ability creatures. This was actually a super cycle with 10 of them, that they had allied creatures that you would pay a mana of an allied ability, allied color, to get an ability. They also had allied color creatures with taps abilities. These were restricted to the next color in the cycle, but effectively they were very similar to the one before, that you'd pay some mana of an allied color, the next one in the color cycle, and tap it for an effect. They had instant sorceries. These were sorceries that would have an effect that, for extra mana, you could cast them as an instant. Now they had allied color kicker spells. These were spells that if you paid them, you could have a kicker cost of the next color in the color cycle that would give an extra effect to it, that you could kick it with that other color. So it was a white spell, kick it blue. Now they had a group of kicked creatures. You'd pay a mana cost and they'd come into play with extra 1/1 counters on them. They had kicked creatures with color. This means you'd kick it, it would have a color cost to it, and it would come into play with +1/+1 counters and an ability that is relevant to that kicked creature's color. They'd kick spells. These kick spells, they play them and they'd have an effect equivalent to whatever color it would be, but for a kicked cost, it would have an extra effect also appropriate to the color that it is. So a black one would have 2 black effects. They had a cycle of legendary dragons. These were 3 mana legends that cycled in amongst it that would be 6/6 flyers that would cost you 6 converted colorless mana, that each of them had an effect when they damaged an opponent, dealt combat damage, that you could pay 2 and their center color, their color of the 3 they have, and it would have an effect because you dealt damage to your opponent. They had a cycle of attendants. These were golems that cost 5 converted mana costs that were 3/3s you could sacrifice with 1 mana to get the 3 mana of one of the appropriate dragons. So they made it easier to play one of these dragons. There was masters. This cycle of wizards each get an ability that for the 2 allied mana colors, they would give an ability. So effectively, whatever color it would be, the 2 allied colors, you could pay 2 of that and tap it to have an ability. Similarly, there was the apprentices, which for 1 of the allied color and tapping it, you would have smaller effects on the apprentices. So the masters and the apprentices were sort of 2 cycles that worked together. There was a cycle of weavers that had activated ability that helped out allied colors. There was a cycle of cameos, artifacts that cost you 3 to put out that tapped for 1 of 2 allied colors. So one of them might tap for white and green. There was a cycle of sack lands. These lands came into play tapped. You could tap them for a certain color, or you could tap it, sacrifice it, for mana of each of the color that it would normally tap for as allied colors. So if it was white, you could tap and sacrifice for green and blue. There was also the tap lands. They came into play tapped, and you could tap them for a pair of allied colors. You could tap them for green or white. So effectively, that's what it was. Now, the set had 2 mirror pairs, including Crusading Knight and Marauding Knight, and for the other one, Absorb and Undermine. And it also had 4 parallel pairs, including the pair of Aura Mutation and Artifact Mutation. Now, the set had 19 reprints, including Holy Days, and 11 functional reprints, including Methrin Zombie for Drowned, which was previously printed in the dark. Now, there was a mistake in the printing for the pre-release card. It had the wrong copyright date on that Latin Raging Kavu. Now, the pre-constructed decks were a red-black one called Blowout, a blue-black one called Dismissal, a white-green deck called Heavy Duty, and a deck with all 5 colors called Spectrum. Now let's talk about some of the cards from this set. There was Absorb. You counterspell, and you gain 3 life. Armadillo Cloak, an enchant creature. The enchant creature got +2/+2 and trample, and whenever it would dealt combat damage, you would gain that much life. There's Italia, Samite Master. She's a white legend that for X and tapping it, you gain 1 of 2 effects. Noting right now that both of these effects require that you use white mana only. So X white mana and tapping her for this. 1 is you can prevent the next X damage a target creature would deal this turn, and the other is you gain X life. Your choice on which one you want to use. Then there's, of course, Aura Shards. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. May. It's a pretty good one that I still use today. There's Backlash. You tap an untapped creature, and it deals its power to its controller. There's Baron Spite. It's a pretty good blue-black spell. You choose 2 creatures an opponent controls. That player sacrifices one of those creatures and returns the other to their hand. Their choice on which one it happens. There's Benelish Heralds, a 2/4 that for 3 colorless and 1 blue, you could tap it to draw a card. Benelish Trapper, a 1/1 that for 1 white and tapping it, you could tap a creature. There's Blind Seer. For a colorless and a blue, Target spell or permanent becomes the color of your choice until end of turn. So for decks that rely on color, this was a really good one. Bog Initiate. For one colorless, you produce one black mana. So this creature here can cycle any color mana very easily and efficiently into black mana. Captain Sisay. This is a legend, of course. She has the ability to tap, search your library for a legendary permanent, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So she has the ability to search for other legends for you. Very good in a deck that's legend heavy. Coalition Victory. If you control one of every basic land and a permanent of every color, then you win the game. So if you have all 5 colors and permanents and all 5 basic lands, it's an alternate win condition that was introduced here. Collective Restraint. It's a domain one. For each basic land you control, when someone would attack you, they must pay X, X being the number of basic lands, per creature attacking you. So if you have a deck with all 5 basic lands, it would cost someone 5 mana to attack you per creature they're attacking you with. Distorting Wake. For X and 3 blue, you return X permanents to their owner's hand. So it's a big return a lot of things of your choice to your opponent's hand. Dromar the Banisher. One of the legendary dragons, 6/6 flyer. If it deals combat damage to an opponent, you can pay 2 colorless and a blue, blue being the center color on it, and you choose a color, and all creatures of that color are returned to their owner's hands. You have to be color not to bounce Dromar here, but might be worth it to get rid of some other stuff. Dueling Grounds. No more than one creature can attack during a turn, and no more than one creature can block during a turn. Elvish Champion. Other elves get +1/+1 in Forest Walk. Not bad in an elf deck, unless you're playing another elf deck. Emperor's Galenia. For 2 blue and tapping it, you gain control of a legendary permanent. That's it. It steals legendary permanents. Fertile Ground. It's an enchant land. That this land, when it taps for its normal mana, you can also add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool at the same time. So it gives you an extra mana for that land of any color. Fires of Yavimaya. Your creatures have haste. You can also sacrifice it to give a creature +2/+2 until end of turn if you really wanted to. Frenzied Tilling. You destroy target land. You may search your library for a basic land and put it into play tapped. So you get rid of an opponent's land and you get one yourself. Global Ruin. For each player, they choose among the basic lands they control one of each of those basic lands and sacrifice all of the lands you control. So if you're in a 5-color deck, you still have 5 lands. If you're less colors, you probably will have less lands, but it is a land global removal card. There's Hannah, Ship's Navigator. For a colorless, a blue, and a white, you can tap her and return a artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. There's Harrow. In addition cost to it, you have to sacrifice a land, but you search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them into play. So you get rid of 1 land for 2. There's Kavu Lair. Whenever a creature of a power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, its controller draws a card. Methrin Aerostat. Now this creature is interesting because once it's in play, you can pay X and a blue and take a creature card with a converted mana cost of X from your hand and put it into play. But then you return Methrin Aerostat to your hand. So you can effectively switch Methrin Aerostat with a creature from your hand if you have 1 more mana. But also it helps in multicolor because then you don't have to worry about that color then. You only need the 1 blue. Molimo, Mara's Sorcerer. It is a star trample where star is the number of lands you control. Nightshade Master. This is one of the masters in the a series of them. For 2 blue, you return target creature to its owner's hand, very powerful. Or for 2 red, you do 2 damage to target creature or player. Opt. You scry 1 and then draw a card. You should look at the top card, decide whether to put it back or the bottom, and then you might draw that card. For 1 blue mana, that was really good. Phyrexian Altar. You can sacrifice a creature to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Pretty good for cycling in from creatures to mana. Plague Spores. You destroy target non-black creature and target land. They cannot be regenerated. Planar Portal. For 6, you can tap it, search your library for a card, and put it into your hand. As simple as that, a great way to search for cards from your library if you have a lot of mana. There's Pledge of Loyalty. It's an enchant creature that for each permanent you have in play, this creature gets protection from that color, from whatever colors it has, which does not remove Pledge of Loyalty. So playing Pledge of Loyalty gives your thing protection for white to begin with, but you can have other permanents giving it other protections. Protective Sphere. 1 colorless, you pay 1 life, you can prevent damage from a source that is the same color as the mana you use to play Protective Spear. So it's very good in a rainbow deck that you can pay whatever mana and pay 1 life, and you reduce whatever damage you would have taken from a source to 1. Pulse of Lanoir. Your lands now tap for any color of your choice rather than just the normal ones they would. So when you tap a land, you can choose what color that adds to your mana pool rather than its normal. Quarian Elves. When it comes to play, you choose a color. This elf can tap for a green or for 1 mana of the chosen color. Recoil. You return target creature to its owner's hand. That person has to discard a card now. Might be that one if they didn't have a hand. Ray Dawnbringer, a 4/6 flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Rith the Awakener, another one of the 6/6 flying dragons. This one, when it deals combat damage to an opponent, you may pay 2 and a green and choose a color. For each permanent of that color in play, you get a 1/1 Sapperling. You can get a lot of Sapperlings like this. Sapperling Symbiosis. This is one of those sorceries you could pay 2 to make it an instant, but for each creature you have, you put a 1/1 green Sapperling into play. Shackles. You put on a creature, it does not untap during its controller's untap step. You can pay 1 white to return it to your hand. It's one of the returning enchantments. Spirit of Resistance. If you control a permanent of each color, you prevent all damage that would be dealt to yourself. But you have to have a permanent of each color for Spirit of Resistance to take effect. Sterling Grove. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, but you can also sacrifice Sterling Grove to search your library for an enchantment and shuffle your library, put it on top of it. So yes, you give all your other enchantments Shroud and 2 Sterling Groves to protect each other, but you could also search for an enchantment that you really wanted. Sway of Illusion. Any number of target creatures become the color of your choice until end of turn. You draw the card. Another color changing one. Tangle. You prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn. Creatures that attacked during this turn do not untap during their controller's next untap phase. So you can prevent your opponents from dealing damage to you in any form, not just combat, and then they also don't untap for next turn. Sablo Tavok. A 7/4 first strike that has protection from legendary permanents that for 2 black mana and tapping it, you can destroy target legend. It cannot be regenerated. So then there's Urza's Filter. Urza's Filter, when you have it in play, it's an artifact that all your multicolored spells cost you 2 less to cast. Then there's Vridaloth the Ancient. It has a kicker of X. Now, when it's in play, your Sapperling tokens and your other tree folk get +1/+1. But whatever you kicked it for, whatever that X is, you put X 1/1 green Sapperling tokens into play. So when you play Vridaloth, you can play with a whole bunch of extra mana and just throw out Sapperlings along with it. Washout. When you play it, you choose a color, and you return all permanents of that color to their owner's hand. So you can just remove a color from the battlefield. Probably not blue since you're playing blue, but any color you really could. So that's it for today. I introduced you to Invasion, an incredibly popular set that has shown that it has many cards that even now are actually fairly well balanced and powerful. Orishard, Sterling Grove, I can name others, Tangle. These cards still hold some clout. Sterling Grove a little less now, but Orishard's still a lot. Even Armadillo Cloak. These are spells and powers that have continued to be very good in Magic, even now. And you can see how the set itself was well balanced and had an incredible feel to it, this multicolor, which none of the other sets before had really had. So it's now entered a new age of love of multicolor and this new level of Magic that can show off a resurgence in what it really can do. An impressive amount. That Invasion itself, with its storyline, was a very powerful story and showed off it expressly in its cards very effectively. So, if you have any questions, comments, anything you say, anything you think I left out, please just leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, linked in the description below. If you want to see some other Magic content, I can suggest to my friends of the multiverse, Card Bazaar, They Said, We Said, and Tasty Snackies. I usually link them in these videos. I still suggest them as some great people that do some great Magic content. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.